Hi guys, Slevin here. So today, as it's Wednesday, I usually upload a video game that you might not have tried or may not have played as much or God knows what. As you can see, I'm doing something different as well this Wednesday, but it's not game related. You see, I have no mouse, no keyboard. I'm clearly not in game somewhere. Welcome to my living room. Because today we're going to be talking about a tabletop game that I've mentioned throughout my videos, and that is Dungeons and Dragons, right? Because I may have just kind of mentioned it in passing and so on and so forth, but never actually said anything about it properly. Now, what is Dungeons and Dragons? It'll seem a bit daunting since there's a lot of rules, a lot of things you have to get your head around, but those are more like guidelines, right? So a general sort of structure around which you can construct your ideal world in which to adventure. Let's start from the beginning, right? And we'll move our way through the actual game itself. So the idea is you have to get together with some friends, right? No laptops needed, no tablets unless you want to check PDFs or rules online or whatever. I will say that yes, there are versions of the game that are on PC with set stories and so on and so forth, just using the basic rules of D&D. But those aren't exactly like that, because in those you are limited to the story given, right? Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, and so on and so forth. In D&D, you are limited only to your imagination, right? And the rules, again, apply only up to the points where you think that, okay, you know what, maybe I want to do something different. So, how do you do it? You get around with some friends, and some paper, and some pencils, and so on and so forth, and every player will get a character, a hero, right? Anything, think of the classic fantasy classes, right? So we're talking barbarians, or fighters, or sorcerers, or wizards, rogues, priests, and so on and so forth. And you get, every one of them starts with a hero, except for one player, right? Who's not actually a player. He will be the game master, or the dungeon master, right? And he is what the other players' characters experience. He is what they see, what they smell, touch, taste, and so on and so forth. He is all of the characters, the NPCs that the other players meet. He is all of the monsters that the other players fight, and so on and so forth. Now, how does this happen? Let's start at the beginning. The very simplest way of explaining this is saying that the Dungeon Master uses his imagination to create a world, or maybe uses a preset world, but tailors it to his own taste, and so on and so forth. And he places this world, tries to explain it as best as he can, in as much detail as needed, to the other players, and it puts the world forward. Explains creation, geography, maybe history, economics, politics, whatever. You don't need to go into too much detail from the get-go. At the start, it might just be describing what the small hamlet that you're in looks like. Who's the mayor? Is there a blacksmith? You get the point. And the other players each react to the world and make decisions in that world. The easiest way to kind of think about it, to actually experience it firsthand, and what I recommend is starting off with an actual pre-made adventure, because there's a lot of good ones, and which have very useful guidelines about what's going to happen, what a dungeon looks like, how monster fights go on, and and everything you will be encountering throughout the game, what your interaction with the town guard will be like, and whatever. So what do you need to actually play this game, other than, I cannot stress this enough times, your imagination. Seriously, use your imagination, otherwise you will be stuck in the rules and you'll just end up in the character optimization boards. Alright, thankfully you don't need too much money in the long run to actually play this game. So I'm going to show you a lot of rule books maybe, but you actually need only some core books. I played a 3.5 edition of the game, which means you will need some books that look kind of like... right? So what we have here are 3 rule books. One of them is important for the player, especially at the start, and that's the Player's Handbook. I'm not sure whether they're in print anymore for 3.5, but, or, there we go. Let's see if you can, there you go. The Player's Handbook, which contains a lot of useful information about the race you can pick, and what benefits that gives you, what class you can pick and what role that gives you, what skills you can have, climbing, diplomacy, spellcraft, and so on and so forth. What sort of feats you can use. Feats are, you can think of them as like perks, like in Fallout, right? Everything you need, spell descriptions and so on, are contained in the Player's Handbook. Then, for the game leader, the Dungeon Master, Game Master, call him what you want, you have the Dungeon Master's Guide, right? This one goes into a lot more detail, not just about character creation, because the Dungeon Master is not going to be playing a character, not going to be playing just one hero. He's going to be playing a lot of heroes and a lot of NPCs and monsters, right? Everything is contained within these covers, and it's a lot about how to build a world, how to build a stable economy, what your geography should look like generally, you know, because you start off with an idea and then go, okay, well, how can I implement this within the rules? And then you start fleshing things out. You go through this and it says, okay, well, a dungeon should look like this. But it never tells you exactly, like, it doesn't give you a picture of a dungeon. It gives you, generally, do you want to do this? Oh, here's the rule for that. And do you want to do this? Okay, here's the rule for that. And you can combine rules to set everything up the way you want it to. And then, lastly, every DM's favorite, the Monster Manual. Okay? Within these pages, fearsome and formidable foes await. And in here are most of the basic monsters that you can think of in fantasy settings, and a lot of other ones. And these aren't like boring rule books that you just kind of read and read and read. There's plenty of explanations, this looks like a wall of text on either side around the picture and everything, but it's not. It's a lot of fluff, it's a lot of describing, like movement, what they look like, what they prefer, are they greedy, can they be bartered with, other details that might come into, because some players really want to just rush into the fight, and other players might want to negotiate. You might be able to with some creatures, and you might not. So these are the core books that you need to play with. You'll probably, especially for clarification, what do I continue with? There's a lot of stuff I really want to tell you. Okay, then you need every one of the heroes, every one of the player characters, to grab one of these. These are already written down. This is Kane Darkstar, who's a cleric, right? These are character sheets. Now, when creating a character, you use dice to randomly determine stats. The stats given are strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. 3 physical stats, 3 mental stats. Now, depending on your race and your class, that might, like some classes are more dependent on one skill, on one ability than the other. But in the end, these are basically going to give you the general guidelines of what your character can and cannot do. Because whilst imagination sounds great, you're not going to go for a black and white sort of god game. You're going to go for a role-playing game. So whilst you say, yeah, okay, I do want the barbarian to throw me up into the air and I'll grapple the dragon and tie him down and bring him down to the ground, whilst that is by no means impossible, It is very difficult at low levels, right? So, and it very much depends on the roles as well. Anyway, in the character sheets each player will determine what his character can and cannot do, what he's good at, what he's not as good at, what his personality is, because it's very important to know whether the adventurers are good or evil, chaotic or lawful, and so on. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, you need dice. I have tons of little groups of these. There's 7 types of dice, which must be used. The most important of all being the D20, which for you math buffs out there is called an icosahedron, right? It is a 20-sided dice, which determines your fate in battle, your success in use of skills, your outcomes in discussions, and many, many, many other things. And I feel like I'm giving you a lot of information all at once. The entire idea that all of these, like the maps that you're using, additional rule books, everything, like the Dungeon Master screen, which I'll leave up here because I am at the end, right? All of these things are good to have, but what you really need to bring with you is the core books, some printed out character sheets, some dice, which are never very expensive, like you're thinking $5, $10, something like that, and your imagination, constantly, right? So, how do you do this? How do you determine it? Especially if you've never played this thing before, right? The entire idea is that you need someone to step up and just say, you know what, I've been doing a bit of reading, or maybe I haven't, but I'm interested. I'll try holding a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, right? So everyone else gets to roll their characters and create their fantastic party. You might find out that the heroes don't interact so well with each other, because at first you'll notice how different personalities in the group will also transfer into the personalities of the characters themselves. So there's going to be a lot of to and fro regarding who decides what they like, what they don't like, if they agree on things, and many other things. But don't worry, the entire idea is to let them use that imagination, fuel a story. Because the Dungeon Master needs to start off with like a plot hook. Like maybe there's gnolls attacking the town, or the princess has been captured by the dragon, or there's so many other things. And after the Dungeon Master has a general idea, or maybe he's using a pre-made adventure, the players get to react. Are they interested in the issue at hand? Are they more of the type that, instead of being actually open-minded and thinking about what's going to go on, are they the type of heroes that start a bar fight, which happens so often, especially since so many adventures starts in a tavern? And from there on, it's all about just working your way through an ongoing story, because there's no actual end to it, You can't say, alright, we've played for 6 hours today, great session, we'll pick up a new adventure. You could have short-term adventures, like one-offs, but most of the time you really want a cohesive, overarching campaign that deals with a lot of the world and with as many characters, because you want to give the players the impression of continuity. It's not just about telling a small, short story, it's about telling this grand, epic, Lord of the Rings level story, and they get to be involved in it, and their decisions directly influence the worlds. And like the barbarian becomes war leader, and the sorcerer becomes an archmage, and the rogue becomes head of the thieves guilds, and the priest becomes a hierophant of whatever god he chooses. And it's about taking part in a great story, in being there, you know. And at the same time, it's about gaining power, because obviously, as you fight your way through different situations, through increasingly difficult monsters and difficult situations, you amount experience, which eventually turns into further levels. Now, exactly how you level is a bit more of a convoluted idea. Not convoluted itself, but the thing is, you can multi-class. It's not just like in any other RPG where it's like, okay, you've chosen archer, you're going to be an archer for the rest of the game. Maybe you want to dabble in a bit of magic, or maybe a bit of sneakiness, or you've become suddenly very pious due to your story, and you can choose every level to take a different sort of class. But I'm already going into maybe a bit too much detail. The point is that you shouldn't allow the rules to obstruct your view of what this world is that you're putting in front of people, or that you are joining in, because it is as fascinating to be a game master as it is to be a player. The game master, of course, has some other tasks to do, right? So it's certain preparations, but so do players, and they have to discuss a bit about their backstory, about who they are, what they can do, why they can do it. And, the more detail they have in their backstory, it's not just, oh, my parents were murdered, that's why I joined the Knights. That's a backstory, but maybe the Knights were the ones, like a very specific order of knights that were, his parents were killed by a dragon, and these knights were dragon slayers and got there too late but found the infant. You get the point. You can go into as much detail as you want, as much as your imagination takes you. You are, in a very real sense, the game master writes like a broad story in broad strokes, right? The story is big in scope, but the game master doesn't know exactly where it's going to go, right? So you can start off with details and a good world and some villains and some NPCs, and this is the world. And then the heroes come in and they basically write in all of the details and what changes and what doesn't. So who survives, who doesn't. There's the archmage, the one that betrays, it's the king, and it's like a group writing effort. By the end of it, you will have a story to remember, like a proper, well detailed, well written. Most of the time hilarious, because obviously you can't stay in character all the time, so there's going to be all sorts of humoristic banter going on and off amongst the adventurers, between the game master and the adventurers. But it's definitely a lot of fun, and if you find a group that can really like get together like once a week, once every 2 weeks, something, it's still excellent, because you can pick up where you left off and go off adventuring and do crazy stuff and meet interesting characters, as interesting as your imagination will allow you. So by that I mean that some dungeon masters will make their own new characters, some dungeon masters will take characters that are already created, and some dungeon masters will straight up say, you know what, but I want to see Luke Skywalker. But not in a Star Wars setting, because there is a setting for Star Wars. And then he'll say, okay, well, what is a Luke Skywalker? How can I put his particular capabilities in this rule set? There's methods of doing that. As I said, the rules can be changed so that the story makes sense, so that it has cohesion, and so don't let roleplay, that's ROLL, it's like don't let the dice be the only thing you're thinking about, percentages and hit chances and so on and so forth. Don't let roleplay trump roleplay, that's ROLE play, right? Because roleplay will always be the driving force behind the story. Roleplay will be the one that makes the decisions, and don't let a fantastic, wonderful, imaginative experience be dumbed down by simple percentage checking and statistics. whilst obviously at some point you will get into statistics a bit more, and you're gonna figure out, you know, like optimal choices for characters and for monsters and so on. That's just the small little structure that allows this world to exist. But this world exists because you have created it. As a game master and the players together have come together to write this wonderful, fantastic world. So I don't know. Telling you guys any more than this is going into a bit too much detail, I feel, and you don't have all day. But I will say there are endless possibilities of play. So don't limit yourself. Other than the first 3 books, there are plenty of others that you can buy. This is just like a small percentage of those. To add even more rules, to bring more ideas. Maybe there was that one thing that you always wanted to do but never could because there wasn't a rule for it, and the game master helped you out and wrote a rule, but it still feels kind of shaky. And then you find out that there's a book that actually contains, somebody said, oh, well, what if we had that? I guarantee it, much like Rule 34, if you thought up a rule, it's probably in a book already. Or being written, and if it hasn't, discuss it with your game master, and he'll probably help you out with that particular thing. But again, now I'm getting into a bit too much detail regarding exactly what you can and can't do, or you should and shouldn't do. I've been through a lot of experiences. I don't know. If you guys are interested, if you want to hear more, if you want me to go into a bit more detail about some aspects of Dungeons and Dragons, let me know in the comments below. If not, you know, I hope this was helpful, a bit of an eye-opener into what exactly Dungeons and Dragons is, and I don't know, I guess that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it was an instructional thing. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you do, don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below with what you think about Dungeons and Dragons, and how does this make you feel? Have you played it? Do you know people who play it? Are you interested in trying it if you haven't tried it? You know, as always, I will be seeing you guys in the next video. Have a wonderful day, be excellent to each other, and always roll those natural 20s. If you got that reference, that's excellent. If you didn't, then, what is it? Oh yeah, there, the Grey Render shall eat you. I'll explain. There, you also use minis. Forgot to tell you that. Forgot to tell you about the minis. But yes, to properly define combats, the use of minis is also indicated. Anyway, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Ciao!